Do you condemn the attacks on ICE agents?
What attacks on ICE agents?
Well, one other clarification, Anna, which is that they're now saying that one person, in addition to the shooter, was killed, not two. So one person killed, two injured, in addition to the shooter, if I heard that correctly. Correct me if I'm wrong. But,
that's what I got, too. Two people deceased, including the shooter.
Okay, and look, I think the bullet casings engraved with anti-ICE messages is a huge and key revelation in this case, because this is now the third instance of targeted violence where we're seeing that. Obviously, the Charlie Kirk assassination and the Luigi Mangione alleged killing of the United Healthcare CEO in New York being the others, and that suggests that there's a copycat phenomenon going on here, and the fact that they're investigating this as a potential act of targeted violence, I think we can conclude that ICE was targeted here based on that piece of evidence. That is extremely significant, and just cast this in a new light and suggest that this is the latest in a series of incidents that really underscore the problem that we are experiencing right now in this country with politically motivated violence. And you heard the Senator Ted Cruz there talking about dialing down the...
I don't know if you all have followed the news, and we're still learning a little bit about it, but what we know is that in Dallas, Texas, an ICE facility, an Immigrations and Customs Enforcement facility, was opened fire upon by a violent left-wing extremist, a person who wrote anti-ICE messaging on their bullets, and there's some evidence that we have that's not yet public, but we know this person was politically motivated. They were politically motivated to go after law enforcement. They were politically motivated to go after people who are enforcing our border. And I think that is the most disgusting thing.
This is the third shooting in Texas directed at ICE or CBP. This must stop. To every politician who is using rhetoric demonizing ICE and demonizing CBP, stop. To every politician demanding that ICE agents be doxxed and calling for people to go after their families, stop. This has very real consequences. Look, in America, we disagree, that's fine, that's the democratic process, but your political opponents are not Nazis.
The gunman, we can tell you, is dead. Officials say he took his own life, and sources have identified the shooter as 29-year-old Joshua Jahn. The FBI says the suspect wrote anti-ICE messaging on bullets, and they are calling it a targeted attack.
Well, Dia and Jason, a thorough investigation is underway right now to learn more about a man named Joshua Jahn. Multiple sources say that the 29-year-old is the person who pulled the trigger this morning. Now, law enforcement is working to figure out what his motives were. We know officers responded to 2 addresses so far potentially linked to this man, one in Fairview, that's in Collin County, and another in Durant, Oklahoma. We have crews at both locations who are working to learn more. Officials say a shooter was, quote, firing indiscriminately at the building in a van that was transporting migrants who had been detained and were in ICE custody. 3 of those detainees were shot. 1 of them died. Dallas police confirmed that officers found the shooter on the roof of a building that was close to the facility. They say he had shot and killed himself. FBI officials stated the shooter was found with ammunition with the term anti-ICE etched into it. FBI Director Kash Patel posted the photo you're looking at on your screen right now to social media earlier today. While investigators are still working to confirm a motive, law enforcement and elected officials spoke out against political violence in response to this shooting, calling for a calmer political rhetoric.
Is that the rhetoric has to stop. There are people out there who are seeing what is being placed online, and they're coming and they're doing acts of violence against ICE employees. So that's kind of all I have for today, is that it's just got to stop.
Today at approximately 6:40 a.m., we received a assist the officer call. We responded to the call, got to the scene, and we later learned that we had 4 individuals that were shot, 2 of them deceased, including the shooter. The DPD was able to locate the shooter who was deceased. We're going to be working this investigation shoulder to shoulder with our federal partners. The FBI is on scene. And right.
Hi, guys. Yeah, officials spent most of this press conference talking about how this anti-ICE rhetoric has to stop, or you have this violence like this happen. Federal agents, they're just trying to enforce the law, these officials say. The FBI is now investigating this as a targeted act. Here is what we know. Homeland Security says that before 7 a.m., a sniper started shooting from a nearby rooftop and fired indiscriminately at the ICE facility, including a van that was in the Sallyport. DHS says 3 detainees in that van were shot, and at least one of the detainees was killed. The gunman then turned the gun on himself.
On messages being written on the shell casings found near the shooter, who we are told took his own life after the shooting, gives us some now direction as to motive. Anti-ICE messages. We also heard from the ICE official who, making a turn, said, referring to the July 4th shooting you and I were talking about a short time ago at another ICE location from an individual who fired from on the ground, that the rhetoric has to stop, he said. It just has to stop. There is no secret, given the events of the last couple of weeks, that we are in a very brittle time in terms of politics, in terms of rhetoric, and in terms of violence, which is, this was a busy morning. It's prior to 7 a.m. Teams that have been out executing arrests in the early morning hours are coming back in with detainees to this facility, and that one of these, a van, not a van, we are told, from ICE, but from another agency, another federal agency that was out making arrests on behalf of ICE, is approaching that location, and that suddenly, from an elevated location, someone opens fire on that van. Now, Pam, you know these vans. We've seen them before at federal facilities. Typically, these are vans that have tinted windows, so you can't see whether they're occupied or who they're occupied by. I would suspect that that's probably the case in this instance. When someone opened fire on the van, whether they were aiming for the driver or the person in the passenger seat, or they believed that the van might have contained federal agents but weren't able to see. They were, according to the FBI, believed to be targeting federal law enforcement officers. When
we might call this getting strike ready. I think of it as getting us strike ready or street ready. And part of that is understanding our own strength. And as we develop that strength, being able to assess our risk tolerance, because we know that risk tolerance increases as the severity of the situation increases and as our own understanding of what's happening increases. So overall, the more we understand what's effective, what the risks are, and who's ready to participate, the more impact we can have.
I don't know of any police department that routinely wears masks. We know that there are other groups that routinely wear masks. NSC 131 routinely wears masks.
Mayor, just to clarify, are you comparing ICE, you said, to NSC 131, the neo-Nazi group? Are you comparing them to a neo-Nazi group?
What I said is that Boston Police and no police department that I know of at the local level routinely wears masks.
Donald Trump's modern-day Gestapo is scooping folks up off the streets. They're in unmarked vans wearing masks, being shipped off to foreign torture dungeons. No chance to mount a defense, not even a chance to kiss a loved one goodbye, just grabbed up by masked agents, shoved into those vans, and disappeared.
And every single one of them, no matter what it takes, no matter how long it takes, will of course be identified.